Max Verstappen wins 10 Grand Prix in a row to take the all-time record.
And the first ever F1 driver to win 10 consecutive races.
Max's perfect 10 and the whole world rejoiced. Well, not quite. Because Mercedes thought that this was the moment not to congratulate Red Bull, but to rain on their parade.
I'm no more impressed than I have when Michael was leading, and when Sebastian was leading, when Kimi was driving, when Fernando was winning.
I don't know whether he cares about the record. It's not something that would be important for me, any of those numbers. For Wikipedia, nobody reads that anyway.
And some say that F1's become overly sanitised. Are you of little faith? And whilst this from Mercedes was relatively tame, it got us to thinking, what were the 10 most controversial interviews in all of F1 history? Number 10, Max calls Eddie Jordan a to his face? Well, kind of. Because Max has never been shy when it comes to digging out people, whether that's the media, fellow drivers, or even his own race engineer. But after some very enthusiastic moves only 1 week earlier at Spa, Max would go unpunished by the FIA. The people's champ Eddie Jordan, no less, would challenge Max on this. Max in turn would respond with a very cheeky hand gesture.
Max, I've got to ask the old perennial question. How lucky do you feel that you didn't have a penalty from Spa?
And yeah, some will say that Max is just fidgeting here, but the cheeky grin and wink to the presenter whilst he's motioning with his hand kind of gives the game away. That's a bit naughty from Max, this. Hence it quite rightfully takes its place on our list. Kimi had to go for a The Iceman was a fan favourite, always, as much for his no-frills approach off the track as for his heroics on.
Within 20 minutes, I must have fallen straight to sleep. And I had long hair at the time, like shoulder-length hair. Literally burst, the door gets smashed to pieces. It's Kimi and his mate, and they come bursting in. They have this full-on fight in bed. I'm wrestling him, and he's pinning me down. His mate's got me pinned down. He gets a set of clippers and buzzes like a reverse Mohican down the middle of my long shoulder-length hair.
But for all of Kimi's rebellious excursions, one stands head and shoulders above the rest. His 2006 is the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Brundle grabs Kimi for a pre-race chat, as you do. And as it turns out, Kimi had missed the all-important Pele presentation. This was mandatory fare for drivers. How dare he do such a thing? And Brundle, being Brundle, was brave or stupid enough to ask Kimi why. And Kimi's response, goated.
And he gets Kimi, he says, Kimi, you were notably the only one that wasn't at the presentation with Pele. And Kimi just went,
will you get over it?
Yeah, I was having a
I mean, could this fella be any more anti-establishment? Loss of buttoned up sponsors be damned, because Kimi, for what it's worth, didn't give a shit. And that's why this is so controversial, because it happened at a time when all the drivers were same. To be straight-laced was their modus operandi. And that's how we fell in love with Kimi, and why we'd rejoice less than 12 months later when at this very same track, the Finn would go on to win his first and only World Drivers' Championship. Number 8, don't touch me. It's 2011, Singapore. Massa pulls a move on Hamilton, but the two come together. Lewis is to blame. The contact would destroy both their races. Lewis ended up with a damaged front wing. Massa, a puncture. In the pen post race, a fuming Felipe Massa made a beeline for the Brit to give him a piece of his mind.
Good job, man. Very good.
Felipe's sarcastic pat on the back betrays his underlying rage. But Lewis, steadfast in his response. It's easy to forget the early 10s when these two, they were genuine rivals. And 08, where the two took the championship down to the final turn of the final lap. Last lap controversy. AD21, hold my beer. Lewis's interview here is controversial, not because of what he said, but because of what Massa did. The abrupt interruption, the unbridled aggression between McLaren and Ferrari's finest. Messrs Hunt and Lauda would have been proud. Senna, you're no longer a racing driver. This is the first time on this list that a current driver is being confronted by an ex-driver, and it won't be the last. Because in 1990, Senna and Prost would come together in a dangerous incident. Senna had done as promised. He'd put a wheel up the inside of Prost into a wedge that was always closing. That Senna kept his foot buried on the loud pedal long after the two were beached is indicative of the Brazilian's intent and his determination to right the perceived wrongs of '89. And Sir Jackie, a legend in his own right, confronts Senna on this, his willingness to take contact. Too often, dangerously. Senna's response, legendary and controversial in equal measure.
That you in the last 36 months or 48 months have been in contact with more other cars and drivers than they might have done in total.
I find amazing for you to make such a question, Stuart, because you are very experienced and you know a lot about racing. And you should know that by being a racing driver, you are under risk all the time. And by being a racing driver means you are racing with other people. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver, because we are competing. We are competing to win. And the main motivation to all of us is to compete for a victory.
Is Senna right? Yeah, he's right. Of course you've got to go for a gap. But context is key here, within reason always. Because racing, it's like a dance. And to pull off any move clean, you're going to need a willing dance partner. Yeah, it's more than a bit controversial, this. Because it's a window into the ruthless mind of one of the greatest pedalers to ever get behind the wheel. It shows you the lengths he was prepared to go to just to take the checkered flag. And they say it's the taking part that counts. Maybe it's because I'm black. It's 2011 and Lewis is going through, he's having trouble in his personal life. For telling the bulls that are red are walking away with what will be their second championship in 2 years. It's the Monaco Grand Prix. Lewis has two comings together, one with Felipe Massa and one with Pastor Maldonado. He's summoned to the stewards for the 5th time in 6 races for yet another penalty. Frustrated, and at the end of his tether, Lee McKenzie pitches a question at Lewis. Why does he think this stuff keeps happening to him?
Why do you think you're so magnetic to the stewards? Why do you think that you obviously feel that you're being targeted?
Maybe it's because I'm black. That's what LEG says. I don't know.
Now, of course, in the prim and proper corporate sponsorship world of F1, even if this is what Lewis thinks, he can't say it out loud. It's just not the exam answer. But he's citing Ali G for Pete's sake. At a time in his life when he's struggling, quite clearly he's saying this tongue-in-cheek. So frequently was Lewis in the steward's room, you can forgive him for feeling like he was being victimised for whatever reason. But as you can imagine, this quote went down like a sack of potatoes with the world's press. Controversial? Oh yeah, it was that. But maybe, just maybe, some good came of this, as this quotable would foreshadow some of the stellar work that Lewis is doing some 12 years later. Think the Hamilton Commission, think Mission 44. Take a bow, Sir Lewis. K-Mag, suck my balls, mate. Now, K-Mag is as chill as they come, normally. But after getting a bit dicey with the podiumless one Nico Hulkenberg, the Hulk very sarcastically tells K-Mag to his face,
once again, those unsportive drivers set my balls, mate. Yeah, they're really good, mate.
I mean, you can't say that, K-Mag. But in the words of Martin Brundle, you can. Because he did. And for my money, worthy of instant GOAT status. Number 3, you're not a world champion. Fernando El Plan Alonso is many things. Villainous, antagonist, cursed even. But one thing he's not is shy. If he has beef with you, you'll know about it. And Johnny Herbert was about to find out. Because in 2016, speculation around Fernando Alonso's retirement was rife. When he was 36 and because of injury, the FIA declared him unfit to race at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Much to the disappointment of the man from Astoria. And Herbert would only confound the issue, saying that his absence this weekend showed a lack of motivation. Oh, Fernando, he did not like this, not one bit. But this was controversial because of how deep Nando had cut Johnny. Like all of the best insults, there was underlying truth to Nando's jibe.
There's a man coming to see you, Johnny. Hey!
We're not retired.
No, you're not going to retire.
You're
That's
not
good.
a true champion.
Good to
have you.
You are.
You ended up as a commentator because you're not true champion, mate.
I know. Thank you very much. That's good. Okay. I wasn't world champion.
Number 2, Senna calls Prost a coward. It's 1992 and Prost has signed a deal to come out of retirement and join the all-conquering Williams for the following season. This all but guaranteed him a genuine shot at the Drivers' Championship that year. But Prost was a wily old fox and he'd learned a lesson from 88 and 89, where once he'd encouraged Ron Dennis to sign Senna in 88, this time the opposite were true. Prost had it written into his contract that Senna could not join him in that dominant Williams. And Ayrton's response to this was public and controversial.
Ayrton, it was announced by Williams that Alain Prost had signed for them today.
The way he's doing, he's behaving like a coward. And if he wants to be sportive, he must be prepared to race anybody at any condition at equal terms, and not the way he wants to win a championship. Everything has been laid down to him before you start. It's like if you go in a 100-meter sprint and you want to have running shoes. and everybody else should have lead shoes. That's the way he wants to race. There is no racing.
And I mean, it surprised no one that Prost wasn't on Senna's Christmas card list, given their titanic battles in 88, 89 and 90. How could they be? But that Senna would express this so fervently, so publicly, is just as shocking now as it was back then. Here Senna's cast himself as the hero, the perfect victim, and Prost, the villain. And this, some say, was Senna's gift, and probably his Achilles heel too. Spygate, they cheated. In 07, the biggest scandal in F1 history would change the sport forever. Spygate. Ferrari and McLaren employees would secretly exchange Ferrari's intellectual property, passing them around as if they were cheat notes in an exam. And they don't get more controversial than this. McLaren would go to a court of arbitration to defend their claims, and despite a mountain of evidence to the contrary, Ron Dennis would affront the world's media and deny all charges.
Much has been made in the press and at the hearing today of emails and text messages to and from our drivers that no Ferrari information had been used by McLaren and that they had not passed any confidential data to the team, affirming that they had never received or used the Ferrari information.
But you know, this isn't the most controversial clip to come out of this scandal. That belongs to Max Mosley. The then president of the FA dropped an absolute bombshell when challenged on why Hamilton and Alonso aren't to be disqualified from the Drivers' Championship.
Alonso sent an email to De La Rosa, the test driver, saying they, meaning Ferrari, they have something different. This may be the key. Let's hope we can test it during our next test. This was about some special gas they were using in their tyres.
Yes.
This is cheating, isn't it?
Yes, and that's why we took all their points away.
Ah, but you didn't, did you? Their points were not taken away.
This is true. And it was an interesting and big debate in the World Council because all the lawyers, people like me, were saying we have to exclude the entire team. This is an absolutely brilliant contest between Alonso and Hamilton. If we throw them out, we'll destroy that. And the majority voted to keep the driver's points.
And let's again be very clear. I quoted to you email correspondence involving Fernando Alonso. You agreed that was cheating, plain and simple. Fernando Alonso on the final weekend of the championship was vying for the world championship. You are saying he was a cheat and should not have been in that position.
And that's your list. The top 10 most controversial interviews in all of F1 history. Remember to subscribe and turn on all notifications. And if you like that one, you'll love this one. The top 5 reasons why you can't blame Michael Massey for Abu Dhabi 21.